Hi, I'm Chris Coven. I'm the founder of In the House. We're an organization to empower in-house counsel through thought leadership, networking, and activities like this one. We have working groups that meet monthly, and this is one of them. This is the Cybersecurity and Privacy Working Group, and we try to discuss questions of importance to cybersecurity lawyers, and we usually have really great guests. And this month is no exception. If you can mute yourself if you're not one of the guests and your phone is ringing. I did want to mention briefly, I don't talk that often about the business side of In the House, but we're part of a small group of companies. One of the newest members of the group is Select Counsel, and we have a few members from that community on today, so you might see a few new faces. And Select Counsel is a group of mostly former AmLaw 100 partners who've gone on to start their own firms, and they want to practice law in a more innovative way and in a more client-driven way. So we thought that there's a lot of benefits that the two groups can get from interacting, and we've just invited some of the members of that group to listen in on this webcast and to begin to do some joint activities. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Heckler. He's the co-chair of this working group of In the House. He's also the editor-in-chief of Cyber Insecurity News. And David, why don't you take it from there and introduce our two great guests that we have today.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just going to let you know that if you take your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, there's a chat icon. If you would like to ask a question, but you don't want to be the person, you don't want to ask it directly, you can always type a question there. And I think Chris will be kind of checking that out regularly to monitor your questions. But there will be an opportunity to ask questions along the way. But I just want to introduce Randy Milch and Francesca Lulgjuraj, explain a little bit about the program that they have been involved in so that you get the basic background before you're going to be probably in a better position to ask questions. So Randy Milch is co-chair of the NYU Center for Cybersecurity. He teaches at the NYU School of Law and is co-director of NYU's new Master of Science in Cybersecurity Risk and Strategy program. And that's what we're really going to be talking about today. He was also the longtime general counsel, as probably many of you know, at Verizon, where he was deeply involved in issues related to cybersecurity before his retirement. Francesca Lulgjuraj is an assistant general counsel and compliance director at Starr Companies, where she's worked at the insurance, travel, assistance, and investment company for a little more than 6 years. She was in the inaugural class of students who graduated from the NYU program last May. Goes for 12 months, and they started the next group in May. So they're already into their second year. And before I ask them a few questions, let me just introduce the NYU program very briefly, because in a way it's kind of the third guest at our meeting today. Several very interesting features distinguish it. It's a 12-month program designed for mid-career executives, not necessarily lawyers. You can be a lawyer, a technologist, just a business person who's interested in cybersecurity and risk. The 12-month program is designed to be completed while you continue working. So it's a part-time endeavor while you continue your job. And most of the work is done remotely and online. And that's enhanced by 3 what are called week-long residencies, which is actually quite common these days in graduate degree programs. I will add that the coursework is, and this is a really important feature, interdisciplinary. The program is co-sponsored by the law school and the engineering school, and it's taught by professors from the engineering school and the law school. And Randy Milch is one of the, not only the co-director of the program, but he's also one of the law professors teaching it. I think I should add that it costs $85,500, not insignificant. However, lots of the students I guess 3 out of the 4 students I talked to who'd been through it or are in it now had help or was completely, the cost was completely absorbed by their companies, by their employers. Anyway, let me start with you, Randy Milch. This is kind of an interesting way to spend your retirement, although you look quite comfortable today. Can you briefly tell us how you got here?
Sure, David, and thank you very much for having me on, and Chris as well. Thank you for having us, and it's an honor to be with everyone here who's a in-house counsel or someone who's interested in in-house work. I'm a big proponent, as you can imagine. As you said, David, cybersecurity was one of the things that I was involved in at Verizon. That responsibility ended up at my feet. Because Verizon, like many companies, had absolutely the best cybersecurity ever if you talk to every single component, and it was obviously not true. So when I presented that problem to the CEO, he did what CEOs do and told me that it was now my job to fix. So I was interested in 2 things at Verizon, national security and cybersecurity. Telecommunications as a legal field probably shouldn't exist. So when I got out of when I retired, cybersecurity was one of the things I wanted to look into, and you can't complain that it's a boring topic. So that's how I got involved, and that's how I found myself at NYU and developing this program and courses around cybersecurity.
We'll come back to you shortly. Francesca, why did you decide that you wanted to go back to school? And can you tell us what it was like?
Sure. And just echoing Randy's comments, thanks to everyone. Nice to meet you all. And hopefully I'll be a regular participant on this as an in-house lawyer.
We'd love to have you. Thanks for doing this.
Great. So just a few things from my perspective. There were a number of reasons why the program at NYU appealed to me, some of which are personal in nature and some of which are more from a professional perspective. So from a personal perspective, I had always wanted to attend NYU, and my mother, who's also in the field of compliance, had attended NYU undergrad while my brother and I were growing up. It took her almost 10 years to finish her undergrad degree because in various fits and starts and while working full time and raising a family, among other responsibilities. It took her a little while. Actually, she ended up graduating from NYU the year before I graduated from Hunter College with my undergrad degree. But I always looked to her as being a role model of mine, and ultimately entered the field of compliance to sort of follow in her footsteps. So it always kind of nagged at me because, I went to Hunter College, which is a great school. But, again, I wanted to sort of tick that box of, following in her footsteps and attending NYU in some capacity. Didn't have the opportunity to do it in law school because of various reasons. And ultimately, always wanted to get a master's at some point, despite having my law degree. I figured I would just get an MBA. Maybe I would go the LLM route, and ultimately, because as the company's chief privacy officer and sort of head of data protection, I was constantly faced with trying to enhance our controls or, in meetings with regard to this, information security problem, this cybersecurity problem. And despite getting some certifications on the privacy side, I still felt as though something was sort of missing, not really speaking the same language as some of my colleagues in other functions. And ultimately, had signed up for the Center on Law and Security's bulletins and came across the NYU program almost by happenstance. And my interest was immediately piqued. You mentioned some of the benefits of the program, it being sort of somewhat limited in duration, it being remote for the most part, and the combination of the technical and legal is really what appealed to me. And so I was immediately interested.
Good. Couple things I want to add just to explain. One is that before you start the program, all of the students have to complete what they call the bridge curriculum that Randy can talk about a little bit if he wishes. But just so everybody has some common language and some common knowledge to start. Otherwise, to technologists who've never studied anything about the law and lawyers who've never done any work in technology would be kind of at sea. I also want to acknowledge that Francesca's mother it's a great immigration story. I mean, she came from Albania. Francesca explained she had lots of responsibilities, and to just decide that by God she was going to complete an undergraduate degree, whatever it took, was, I know, an inspiration to you, Francesca, but it's kind of the immigration story we don't hear that much about these days, and it should be an inspiration to everybody. Okay, but you, speaking of family issues, you had some special family considerations during your 12-month period there. Francesca, you want to tell us a little bit about the kind of juggling you had to do to complete this program?
Sure, and before I talk about that, I'll just mention that my mom would probably be embarrassed if I spoke about her in front of her like this, and often shakes her head when I talk about her being my role model. But yes, when I was applying to the program, I was sort of doing it almost halfway scared. I'll actually get in and actually have to do the program. My daughter was 1 when I started the application process, and after multiple conversations with my husband and with the people at Starr, ultimately decided, okay, fine, I'll apply, and if I get in, then I'll have to deal with it. I did ultimately get accepted to the program, which was really exciting for me. Then while taking the bridge program that you mentioned, learned that I was pregnant with my second child. That happened in April, right before the actual program, the first semester started. And so I had the benefit of being pregnant for most of the program, and ultimately was able to handle somehow, probably with one eye closed, doing the program. I just lost a little more sleep, and everyone was very supportive, of course, and we all encouraged each other. I think my colleagues in the program sort of pushed each other to do our best, and in that way, I very much felt encouraged to continue along, and hopefully one day when my children are older, they'll have some sort of an appreciation for what we were able to do while they were small. One of the considerations was, they probably won't remember if I was on the computer while they were taking a nap or something like that. And so thankfully it worked out well. I did have about a 2.5 week respite after my son was born, between, his birth and the last semester starting. So I took full advantage of that and got some good rest.
I think NYU should give your son a special honorary degree for going
they came on stage with me, which was really nice. So that was a really cool and defining moment of my life that I think I'll always appreciate.
At the graduation event, you had both kids with you when you received your...
Yeah, I wasn't going to do it, but there were thankfully a number of people at the law convocation that were bringing their young children along, and actually one of the keynote speakers had a 9-month-old and had brought her child when she crossed the stage, and so my classmates were saying, you better do it, you better bring them. My 2 days before graduation, my daughter fell in our apartment and split her chin, so she was kind of not in the mood, but ultimately put along and came as well. So it was a lot of fun.
The last question I want to ask you before asking Randy a couple more is, from your experience, can you tell us what it was like back at work during the year when you were during the 12 months you were completing this program, and then how things have changed, if they have, at work since you completed it?
I think a couple of different ways. Within my function, I've almost become, my function being within the legal department, I've become sort of the go-to subject matter expert with regard to how to define the controls of our department. So I think that was one immediate benefit from my perspective. I mean, depending on the day, right? Sometimes I don't want to be technical support for my group, so there's a little bit of a line there. But there was, I think, an immediate benefit in recognition that I was up to speed and sort of on the cutting edge of the concept of technology risk and what we can do to enhance our controls in that area. So that's within my department, and I was constantly sharing best practices and other information and using it to enhance our overall program at the company. So I think that was another benefit. Aside from that, then my relationship with the IT function was enhanced. Our CIO and our CISO and I have a great working relationship. There's actually some talk now about creating a fusion center between our groups. And this year in October, we actually had a summit between the IT security and the compliance function, exchanging information and ideas, and getting into the weeds into what all the different layers of security are, and where there might be opportunities for improvement. So, I think from a relationship building perspective, there's a recognition from the IT and information security side that I have an understanding of how difficult their job is, and that when I'm making suggestions, it's not just to give them more work, but it's overall helping the program. And my CISO jokes that if he gets hit by a bus, that I could be his replacement. I personally don't want him to go anywhere. But I think again, that's another way that they recognize what I can now bring to the table after having gone through the program.
Could I ask a brief follow-up, David? Because I'm curious, did your company, Francesca, do any communication sort of on your behalf to let people know what you're doing, or were you sort of doing that on your own to educate your colleagues about why you were doing it and what you'd learned and how you saw that affecting your role with both legal and IT?
Yeah, I think the company didn't do any broad-scale communication. My supervisors in my chain and a couple of other individuals, like our learning and development manager in HR, for example, our vice chairman, who is ultimately responsible for the IT function, and a couple of other folks, actually had a meeting with some folks from NYU, simultaneously or sort of alongside of my having applied to the program. And so Aaron O'Brien, who is one of the key people at NYU for this program, had come and done a presentation, and that was when we were meeting for the first time, and I was still waiting to hear if I would get into the program. So there were some people that were aware, but it was more informal, ad hoc, and then I guess sort of word got around, and it just built from there.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Randy, let's get back to you. From your perspective, how did that first year go? You're just a few months out from the first year, and were there any big surprises? Good, bad, indifferent?
Well, I think the first year, I guess the first thing I would say is that Francesca should comment on that as much or more than I should. It's interesting. Those of us in company, those of us who have had the corporate experience know that it's important to identify your customer and delight that customer. At times, I'm not sure that higher education recognizes who the customer is, but I try to keep a very firm idea of who the customer is. So I'm interested to hear from Francesca, and as she knows, we almost obsessively ask them for their feedback. 3 or 4 times after every semester, we have a long feedback. We would get feedback from them in written work, and so hopefully it went well from that perspective. Certainly, there were some very nice and supportive comments. That being said, any endeavor like this needs to go through some shakeout. We were trying to be very conscious, given the fact that everybody has a full-time job, to structure the classes in a way that kept the amount of work for everyone at a manageable level. And our promise to the students was they would have 20 extra hours of work a week. And that's quite a bit. That's nothing to sneeze at. And we, in midstream, tried to readjust some things to make sure that across both the law school and the engineering school, because in any one semester, a student could be taking as many as one engineering course. There's really one substantive engineering course per semester, but between 2 and 3 law/policy courses in the same semester. So the need to ensure that we had good coordination across both schools and across the about 15 faculty members, which is a mixture of adjuncts who are experts in the field and tenured professors who are experts in their field, coming together. On top of that, of course, there is a capstone project which runs the entire year, and the groups, we do that in a group setting, and those groups are very largely responsible for self-organization, getting their deliverables done, and that is an extra set of obligations that they have, and which can be compounded because our students come not only from across the country, but also from around the world. So we had and still have multiple students who are on very, very different time zones from the students in the US. And so that sort of coordination actually mimics real life for anyone who's in a company that's got global offices. The difficulty of setting up meetings that don't make your colleagues in another country get up in their pajamas at 2 a.m. to make the meeting. So I think that there is a lot of responsibility. But as you say, this is a master's degree program for, I don't like the word executives, I like the word professionals. This is a master's degree program for professionals. They've got jobs, they've got responsibilities. Not many of them go to the lengths that Francesca did to add to her responsibilities during the course of the semester, but everyone's different. We trust them to be able to step up to these course responsibilities. And so far, last year and this year, it's been, I think, on that front, a success.
Let me ask this. When I was writing an article for Cyber and Security News about this program, for which I interviewed both of you and other people, Randy, you said that you really wanted this whole program to, you just mentioned, mimic the real world, mimic the real life. And you said that right off the bat about how to structure this program. What did you mean? Can you explain what you meant by that to our guests here today?
Sure. When I went to NYU and they asked me to teach cybersecurity, because it's just very surprising to me, but I've gotten a real lesson on higher education in the last few years. In major law schools, no one teaches cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a nits and lice subject for the privacy people want to clutch their pearls about cybersecurity, and then the people teaching con law want to teach a little bit about the Fourth Amendment, and the people teaching crim law want to teach a little bit about cybercrime, trying to get a comprehensive view of regulatory governance and other aspects of cybersecurity is just unusual. So when we started putting this together, I said I would only teach this the right way, and the right way is the way that the real world. So if there's a cyber problem in any one of your companies, the way you deal with that is you have the lawyers and you have the technologists, and they get together to try to figure out how to deal with the problem. And so from the very beginning, it was critical to me to have engineering students and law students together in the original seminar that I put together. And that original seminar, was the genesis of this new master's, this MS degree, Master's of Science degree. And of course, that meant that our effort was to mimic that, have engineering courses, have the law and policy courses, try to give people a fluency and a literacy in the part of that spectrum that they don't have as a result of their job. And the same thing is true in the capstone projects, right? We don't allow the students to self-select their groups. We try to curate the groups to ensure that we have lawyers and technologists, and we have people with compliance backgrounds. We have people with other security backgrounds. We have insurance folks. We have folks from big platform companies. We have folks from little platform companies. We try to ensure that the groups are really cross-functional as much as possible, which is, again, the way in the real world problems like this get solved.
I've got more questions. Let me stop. Do any of you want to jump in, ask some questions, or make comments about what we've heard so far?
And as a reminder, everyone is muted to avoid the problem of background noise, but feel free to unmute yourself. There should be a button in the lower left-hand corner of your Zoom video window, so unmute yourself and ask, or use the chat window. Maybe at the end, I'll unmute everyone in case anyone's having trouble, but.
Randy.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Chris, this is Rick Magnan.
Hi, Rick.
I've been in and out on the presentation because I've been doing some things simultaneously, which I know we're not supposed to do, but your last comments are very, very interesting to me. I teach cyber law and data privacy and all this other stuff at a Swiss law school. And I try to teach the technology because I started as a computer scientist, and I'm a lawyer, and I've done both. But I did a lot of very, very intense technology work for the US government on large national security systems. And in my LLM program that I teach at the Freiburg Law School, I try to teach technology to lawyers. They can use any device you can put in front of them. But as soon as I go into the internal architecture of the system, data flow, data storage, data representation, I've lost them for the most part. There are some that can follow through, but most can't, and they're primarily lawyers, and they're practicing lawyers. And what that causes me to ask you, though, is how do we solve this problem? Because there's a huge gap between the IT department and the legal department. And I'm serving as a GC and a CIO in a small company, so I do both, and I attend seminars for both. And when I talk to my GC colleagues, they say, yeah, we're serving the IT department. When I talk to the CIOs and CISOs, they say, we're not getting anything from the legal department. Either they won't handle it, or they'll give us the most conservative solution, which makes the business impossible to run. And so there's a terrible, terrible gap that the legal community is not filling. They think they are, but they're not, because they don't have the understanding knowledge. And so, like just in doing a GDPR ROPA, if you don't understand data flow and data storage, how can you help your client complete the ROPA? And so I'll stop the lecture there and just ask you, how do we solve this problem? Because the IT people don't have time or inclination to learn the law, but the lawyers think they understand the technology and they don't.
Well, so first off, let me say, I admire you for wearing all the different hats you're wearing, and I admire you for trying to solve the problem through your teaching. From a factual level, I agree with you 100%. I have taught many classes with engineers and lawyers in the same class. And I do that at NYU for the law students and engineering students. So the first thing I would recommend is to get engineering students in your law class. That would help, because that immediately gives you a whole bunch of people. If you have CS students in your law class, you have a whole bunch of people who the lawyers can turn to and they can learn from each other. The second thing I would say is that one way to do this is to find sympathy, and you can do this yourself since you have very significant CS skills. But I would find some CS professors who are very good at explaining concepts. You know, lawyers don't understand the very first thing about the way the internet is created, the inherent insecurity in the internet. They don't understand the very first thing about modern computation since von Neumann, where the executable instructions for a computer are housed in the same place the data is, and you wonder why it's so easy to infiltrate the computer with instructions to make it do things you don't want it to do, because that's the data and the instructions sit in the same place, right? So giving them that sort of fundamental understanding, I think, is important. I think it is not possible, nor should it be expected, to educate the lawyers to a degree that they can match your fluency between the two realms. So you can't aim for that relatively unattainable goal. I think the important thing that is possible is to increase the fluency markedly on both sides, so that you break down the sort of the first two levels of barrier. And the first two levels of barrier that I've detected is, number one, the professionals on both of these sides tend to talk in code to one another deliberately. They talk in code to one another deliberately in order to maintain the suzerainty over their particular realm. So the lawyers will talk code to the engineers. You don't understand the way the law works, blah, 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 blah. And the engineers will say, you don't understand math, so you can't possibly do anything. You're an idiot, right? So that's the first level of conversation that I think needs to be, broken down between the two. And the second layer is that you give people enough understanding so that they can call bullshit on each other. Excuse me.
That's okay.
Term. But it's very useful in a corporate exercise to be able to call bullshit on someone who is trying to skew a solution solving effort by cornering some bit of knowledge and resting on that to say my bit of knowledge trumps. Now, sometimes that's true. I'm not saying it's never the case, but frequently it's not the case. And you need to build that fluency so that you can have the ability to sort of say, listen, I respect that, but I know in 17 other instances that's true. It may be true here, but I'm not going to sit back and let you say that it's true if I don't think it's true. Or you're going to need to do a little bit more than you're doing at this point. So, I think that the problem you posit is impossible to solve at a very deep and rigorous level. It is entirely possible to solve in a fluency level that allows much better communication between the two groups.
And I think we had one of the members who wanted to jump in.
Kay Montgomery. I think you're unmuted now.
Great.
Yes.
Let me My name is Gay Montgomery, and I was in-house at Altria and actually stood up their cyber risk oversight perspective from program, from a overall compliance perspective. And the only reason I was comfortable doing it was because I was a systems engineer earlier in my day. I was actually a COBOL programmer, believe it or not. And that made me not afraid of it. And it made me sufficiently not afraid. So I actually think that if you can just get lawyers to not be afraid of the topic, cyber technology architecture, that which really doesn't take that long, you actually can get them confident enough to ask questions and be willing to say, I don't know. I often wonder, there aren't more programs for lawyers that just get them, forget fluency, just basic competence in advising on a topic that is so important. Even now that I'm in my small practice, I have a Fortune 200 foundation as a client, and they have recently encountered some cyber issues. And so it's the kind of thing you can't go anywhere without those issues. So I was wondering, what does the NYU program do to ground lawyers, to get them over the fear? Or do you self-select that in your selection process?
It's a great question. The selection process is designed, so a typical class has a handful, maybe a somewhat mutant handful, but a handful of lawyers in it. So 5 or 7, right? And our current crop of 35, that's not an overwhelming number. It's got a double handful, if you will, of people with clear engineering backgrounds, right? So clearly they're either in an engineering job as it stands, a cybersecurity engineering job as it stands, or they've elevated themselves to a level of management where I think it's safe to say they don't have hands-on engineering tasks anymore, but they have an engineering, they've risen through the ranks. Everybody else is somewhere in between, as David said. Our aim at admissions is to, from the fear factor that you say, is to, we go through people's transcripts. We look at the last time they had a math course. We look at whether they hadn't had any computer science as an undergraduate. We look at whether they're in a job currently that requires facility with numbers and the like. And that's true for lawyers and non-lawyers. So and if there's someone who looks attractive and they don't seem to have any of those background capabilities, I get on the phone with them and I talk through with them what the course is going to be like, I try to get from them whether they have this sort of math fear, which I think if they do is a problem, math or science fear, which is a problem. You know, people who are self-declared Luddites don't get in the program, right? It's just simply not the way that works. So, I think that we try to look for it that way, but Gail, I believe, like you believe, that it is entirely possible for a non-phobic lawyer, and if you're phobic, you're phobic, and there's too few hours in the day to deal with that. If you're non-phobic, we have teachers who can help you come along. We have your cohort in the class helps you. I mean, one of the great things about this cohort is that it's a very vital, interested and capable group of people. And I can't tell you the number of times I see the lawyers or the non-technical people and the technical people hold up over lunch or hold up over, and they're going through stuff step by step. And the technical folks are being incredibly good about helping people along to understand how the technical stuff works. They're being incredibly helpful during the engineering courses to help the folks through the engineering courses, some of which have a programming component to them. It's not without its technical difficulties. It's not impossible, but it's certainly not without its technical difficulties. And I think that from that approach, we can get non-phobic lawyers over the line. And the same is true for the engineers and the other folks, right? We don't try to turn them into lawyers. We don't grade them on issue spotting. We don't do, it's not like a law school exam. We try to very much make sure that what they're gaining is a good sense of legal literacy, a good sense of the policy nuances, so that when they come to a meeting, they have a good view about, okay, I understand that what we're faced here is some regulator is going to ask me whether I was reasonable or not, right? which is great if you're, which is great if you're 100 years in on tort law, but it's pretty tough in the cybersecurity realm to figure out what reasonable cybersecurity is, right? So trying to give them that nuance and understand the breadth of that is an important topic going the other direction.
Yeah, I have a related question before we move to the next topic. I think a lot of people on this call are probably interested in whether learning more about cybersecurity might make them a more effective lawyer and help with their career. And I'm curious to hear from both Francesca and from Randy, what can people do on the job, whether you're in-house or at a firm? Is it a valuable career move to try to become a sort of bridge, the way it seems like Francesca has, between legal and IT, and to be, bilingual, if you will? And how big an opportunity do you think that is? And is that something that a lot of lawyers should be looking at as a way to sort of burnish their career credentials? Could you comment on that a little bit? It's sort of like, what do you do after this kind of education process to enhance your own standing?
Well, I would defer to Francesca. I mean, her experience today at Starr so far seems to bear out that she's got some credentials that have been proved to be useful. From a broader perspective of the rest of the cohort, in the first cohort, we've had 3 people who have already moved into new jobs that they all regard as better jobs that are cybersecurity related. Some have left their original employer and gone to new places. Others have simply moved within their companies. So far, it's not a statistically valid sample, but
right.
They were immediately able to. And so far in the cohort that we're in the midst of this year, I've had a number of the cohort members who come to me for some advice about internal moves. I guess because I have no hair and I've seen a million of them over the course of the years. And, they have been able to, at least one woman has carved out an entirely new role for herself at her company as the legal advisor to the CISO, a role that did not exist before. She has been able to convince everybody that this is a hugely valuable new role, and the CISO is he seems to be over the moon by the whole thing, right? He has his own dedicated legal policy person to help arrange what he wants to do. So I think that, properly understood, and everyone on this call will understand this, the mantra for at least a decade and a half, maybe 2, has been that compliance is everybody's business, right? That's the mantra in any corporation. Compliance is everyone's business. I'm here to tell you that cybersecurity is everybody's business.
Right.
It's not any different. No matter where you are as a lawyer, and if you're inside a firm of any size, inside a company of any size, you're going to have direct client contact. You're going to be the product lawyer or the marketing lawyer or the sales lawyer, or you're going to be doing one thing or another. If you're not there, and as everyone should be saying, why are we gathering that data? What are we going to do with that data? Who's going to protect that data? What are the flows? How's this going to work? You're not doing your job. You ought to be able to ask those questions and be effective at asking those questions. So cybersecurity is the new compliance in this regard. And so I think that people who have those capabilities are going to be able to do well, I hope.
That's great. Any thoughts on your side, Francesca? I know you've had some success, it looks like. What can you comment on how other lawyers should be thinking about cybersecurity and sort of getting more familiar with those issues?
Unmute yourself.
Yeah, you're muted right now. There you go.
Got it. First, I'll just say I've seen it firsthand. The eyes glaze over as soon as you start even dipping your toe into something a little more technical. and sort of a throw up of the hands, like, well, I don't understand that. And what I try to do when I'm communicating with my colleagues and others, not just people in the legal department, but people in other functions as well, who sort of say, oh, well, you say the word cyber and they say, well, I don't know anything about that, and I can't possibly know anything about that. It's sort of a mental hurdle, if you will. I try to just go back to concepts with which we're familiar, right? Get back to the basics. Cybersecurity is a risk, just like any other risk. It has different variants. And we don't have, as Randy mentioned, a long history of it being everyone's problem. Some of the folks just need to understand that it's not really something as it can be scary. It can have a lot of implications, but it's not so unfamiliar if you think about it as a risk. And if you think about it, as a risk, then you're less inclined to have the glazed over eyes, and maybe you'll sit a little further in your chair forward when someone is talking about it. I think, as Randy mentioned, it's everyone's problem. We do a lot of at Starr awareness campaigns with our employees. We do fake phishing tests. We have a month dedicated to privacy and information security, where we call ourselves professors, and we make ourselves available, for a couple of hours each week, and people come and ask us questions. We do some interesting training and testing, and there are some people that are just, not going to get the message. It doesn't mean that we don't continue to beat the drum. And I think that everyone can benefit, not just lawyers. I mean, I think lawyers absolutely should have more of a familiarity. For me, I'll just mention, from the NYU program, the bridge course I found interesting and helpful. There were diagrams and an app that had quizzes about what is a switch, what is a router, where does the where can you get the RAM actually on the hard disk, and we actually had to program lines of code, and I remember actually recently during a reception talking with Nasir, who's one of the heads on the engineering side, saying I was so excited one night. It's like midnight, and I'm showing my husband how I programmed in the turtle function in Python, just creating a box, and I said, I did that. I drew that. And for me, it was like, holy cow, I'm actually doing this. It's not that hard. And from there, I was just encouraged. And, I've been chatting with my CISO about, should I get my CISA designation? Where do I go from here?
Mm-hmm.
There's the certified ethical hacker, whether anyone takes that seriously or not, so it's, I think people just have to get over that mental hurdle, and sometimes you can help them and make it really easy. And I think NYU in a lot of ways, I think in my class, there were only 4 lawyers. I think we were able to get through it. Ultimately, I think we learned that it wasn't as hard as we thought it was. We just had to sort of, it's a common phrase. I went to law school because I'm not good at math, right? And you just kind of throw that roadblock up. It's hard to educate someone who doesn't actually keep an open mind and try to get into it.
We have a question from Gay that's related to what you were just talking about, certifications. I'll just read it if it's okay with you, Gay. In your opinion, how far do programs like NACD at Carnegie Mellon Cyber Risk Oversight Program and the CISSP certifications go to prepare lawyers to advise clients on cyber issues? Anyone? Randy?
I won't profess to have intimate information on the Carnegie Mellon NACD program. My initial reaction would be that, frankly, any set of education that a lawyer is willing to undertake in this area is going to better prepare them for the issues that they're going to face. The various certifications, having looked through the certification information that you get, you know, I don't think you get an in-depth education from this from taking the certification courses and the certification test. But you certainly learn stuff. So you know, the question is, the question always should turn on what is your near-term use for the information? What are you going to do? I don't think that a lawyer, as a general rule, adding certifications to the end of their name, everything depends. But if you're in a firm or you're in-house, someone is not going to turn to you because of that certification, because you have that certification. I don't think. I think that there's going to be technical folks. They may. But listen, I think any education that anyone's willing to undertake, certainly getting the certification is far cheaper, right? It's far less expensive, far less time consuming probably than our Masters of Science course. There's lots of different levels of effort and expense. All those things need to be taken into consideration. But I would encourage anyone to take more cyber education that meets their time frame and their ability to pay. I'm not against any of it. I'm for all of it.
Maybe at least the certification would be a declaration that you're not a Luddite, because Randy mentioned some people are self-declared Luddites. A certification might be, I'm not a Luddite. So
absolutely true.
I want to say that we had a guest here who appeared on this show, who I wrote about, named Summer Fowler, who is the Chief Security Officer at Argo AI, which makes software for autonomous vehicles. And she has been teaching at Carnegie Mellon for years. She runs their CISO certification program. She would be a really good person to ask that question of, because she is intimately familiar with Carnegie Mellon certification programs.
I'm sure it's a great.
Can help you get in touch with them.
Carnegie Mellon's a great place, so I'm sure it's a great program.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's becoming a real tech center too. It's not just Steel Town anymore. I see we're running low on time now, so but I think David and I can stay around for a few more minutes. I did want to make a book recommendation because of something Francesca said. For anyone that wants to know the structure of the internet and does not have a technical background, there's a really wonderful book called Tubes, and it's by a non-technical journalist. It's entertaining, it's fun, and it teaches you all about the physical infrastructure of the internet. And it's a really great primer on that. And it's useful. I think all lawyers should read it that have any role in the tech world at all. So sorry, David, I just wanted to put in that little plug for the book because I think it's a great book.
I'll just say one thing about the NYU program that was kind of implicit in some of the comments that were made, but I think it's important to highlight the residencies are really important in that they create this solidarity, this network that all four of the students who have been through it or in it now commented on. And that's what Randy was talking about, you know, helping each other. And Francesca talked about the support she felt. And that's because they meet early on in the program. And then they come back and they're together. And, you know, online is a great place to learn things, but there's nothing like the human contact to solidify a core group that continue to be each other's supporters well after the program ends. And everyone I talked to who's been through it talked about how important it is to have those people to consult and to share a friendship with, and a professional and personal friendship with afterwards. And I think that's a great part of what has made this program so far successful, as far as I can tell.
Well, that's an important issue. What is the role of the nascent alumni community, from Randy, from your perspective and Francesca's perspective, even though it's a brand new program? Are there alumni activities, and is there any kind of plan to help people with that?
Yeah, there absolutely is. We make sure that we invite our huge alumni group back to all of the functions that we have with the current cohorts. So, it was notable. I'll say simply this: that the weeks in the residency weeks are very, very busy. You start early in the morning. We stop at 5:30 with the classes, but then people are meeting on their capstone projects. We have one night that is devoted to capstone projects. We have another night that's devoted to alcohol. That alcohol part has gotten more crowded as we've gotten more of the cohort back. So next year we're going to have to get a bigger place. But I think that it's, from our standpoint, I think it's two things. One is we want to create this community among the students. I think that they have all indicated to us that it's very important that they know, and they have, people are doing business together. People are talking, people are reaching out. And secondly, for us, quite frankly, it's important as a source of new folks to come to the program, right? These are our best ambassadors, because as David pointed out, it's an expensive program. Even if our vets get a lot of help from Yellow Ribbon and the GI Bill, most companies provide some sort of assistance to the students. It's still, even if they're not making a huge financial investment themselves, and some of them are, it's a huge time investment. And we want to be sure that they are able to continue to leverage what they get out of this for as long as possible, right? We make sure that they can still access the materials from the course postgraduate. We do all sorts of things to try to ensure a continuity there that helps build both the utility of the course going forward, but also, it helps build the reputation of the place. And we hope we're doing a good job. And as I said, these are our best ambassadors to go out and help find new folks for the program and show that we're doing a good job.
Francesca, do you want to add something?
Yes, I think so. I've been invited back to speak, actually. There was a group of Thai judges that were brought to NYU on different topics, and myself and 3 other of my classmates from the NYU program were able to come and speak about fintech, and that I found a great opportunity. So that was almost immediately after graduation. And then since then, I've been able to participate in a couple of other NYU events, including the night dedicated to drinking, which was Halloween week. A lot of fun. But I mean, we have actually a WhatsApp group, and we're from our class, and we're constantly sending each other messages. Have you read this book? Has anyone seen this article? And we're just staying connected that way. I'll say yes, the residencies were an excellent opportunity to exchange information, and I did say it before, but I felt as though my classmates and being around them, because they were all so incredibly intelligent and in some ways experts in their fields, challenged me to bring my A game. And you don't get that as much, if it's just a purely online program. So it's being able to, continue to connect with the professors, with the classmates, with the current cohort and future cohorts has been really great. One of my other colleagues from Starr is actually has applied to the program, and he's really hoping he gets in. So absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. What's such a great conversation, really jam-packed. I know that if you're looking for more people to volunteer to participate in alcohol-related activities, I think I can speak for both David and myself that we would happily volunteer and sacrifice our time to participate. So, but thank you, Randy. Thank you, Francesca. Really great work that you're doing there. And We really appreciate it. By the way, anyone who's participating and wants to watch this program or prior programs, you can go to inthehouse.org and click around on the menu items, and you can see, hopefully tomorrow this will be posted, and you can see our prior programs going back, what, David, a year and a half or so. We have a pretty good library now of really interesting speakers, including
and articles.
And
The
articles.
article I wrote about this program will be up there next to the video. So
Absolutely.
those
So
of you who still read occasionally.
thanks, everybody. I'm going to end the video now, and I really appreciate everybody's time.